The sun rises slowly over the Iranian plateau, casting its golden light on mountains that seem as old as time itself. The wind whistles across vast deserts, through fertile valleys, and over rivers that have nourished civilizations for thousands of years. This is ancient Iran, known to the world as Persia, land of kings and poets, warriors and dreamers, a place where empires were forged and legends were born. To understand ancient Iran is to journey into a world where power stretched from the edges of Greece to the banks of the Indus, where majestic palaces gleamed with gold, and where the first great road networks carried messages across continents. It is a story of ambition, faith, war, and wisdom, a story that continues to echo in every corner of human history. Long before the name Persia became known to the world, tribes roamed this land, carving out lives in a harsh but beautiful landscape. The Elamites were among the earliest to leave their mark. Flourishing as far back as 2700 BCE, they built powerful kingdoms in the southwest. With their capital at Susa, they traded with Mesopotamia, adopted and reshaped Sumerian writing systems, and created art that reflected both strength and mystery. The Elamites were not yet an empire, but they planted seeds that would one day grow into the mighty civilizations of Iran. Centuries passed, and waves of Indo-Iranian peoples swept into the region from the steppes. Among them were the Medes, fierce horsemen who mastered the rugged highlands. By the 7th century BCE, they rose to prominence, uniting tribes into a powerful kingdom. The Medes fought against the mighty Assyrians, striking alliances with Babylonians and helping to topple one of the most feared empires of the ancient world. For the first time, Iran tasted the power of empire building, and the Medes created a political foundation upon which something far greater would soon rise. That greatness came with the Persians. In the mid-6th century BCE, a leader emerged from the rugged heartlands of Fars, Cyrus, son of Cambyses. History would remember him as Cyrus the Great, charismatic, strategic, and visionary. Cyrus began uniting Persian tribes under his command. With each conquest, he gained not just territory, but also loyalty, weaving together a new kind of empire. When he overthrew the Median king Astyages, he did not destroy the Medes, but absorbed them, blending cultures into a single, stronger entity. Cyrus's genius was not only in warfare but in governance. He conquered the mighty kingdom of Lydia in Asia Minor, then swept into Babylon, the jewel of Mesopotamia. Yet, unlike so many conquerors before him, Cyrus did not burn, plunder, or enslave. Instead, he respected local customs, religions, and traditions. The famous Cyrus Cylinder, often called the world's first charter of human rights, proclaims his policies of tolerance and freedom. He allowed exiled peoples, like the Jews, to return to their homelands. He showed the ancient world that empire could be built not only with the sword, but with respect and justice. Under Cyrus, Persia became the first true superpower of the ancient world. His empire stretched from the Aegean Sea to the borders of India, a vast realm connected by roads and secured by satraps, regional governors, who reported to the king. When Cyrus died in battle in 530 BCE, the world mourned a ruler whose vision transcended brutality. Even his enemies respected him, and his legacy would shape empires for centuries. But Persia's story did not end with him. His successors expanded what he had built. Cambyses too conquered Egypt, extending Persian power deep into Africa. And then came Darius I, known as Darius the Great, who brought the empire to its zenith. Darius was not just a warrior king, he was an organizer, a builder, a man who understood that empire required more than armies. He divided the realm into satrapies, standardized currency, and built the royal road, a marvel that stretched over 1,500 miles, allowing messages to travel from one end of the empire to the other in mere days. Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor darkness of night prevents these couriers from completing their appointed course with all speed, wrote Herodotus of the Persian messengers. It was a system so advanced that it inspired the postal networks of later civilizations. In Persepolis, Darius constructed one of the most breathtaking capitals the world had ever seen. Great staircases rose with carved reliefs, showing delegations from across the empire, bringing gifts: Ethiopians with ivory, Indians with gold, Babylonians with textiles. These carvings were not just decoration, they were propaganda, a message carved in stone that Persia was not merely a conqueror, but the center of a world united in diversity. Religion, too, shaped the soul of Persia. Zoroastrianism, founded by the prophet Zoroaster, became a guiding philosophy of the empire. It spoke of a cosmic struggle between Ahura Mazda, the god of light and truth, and Angra Mainyu, the spirit of darkness and lies. It taught the importance of choice, of free will, of aligning oneself with truth and righteousness. This dualistic vision of good and evil influenced later faiths, from Judaism to Christianity to Islam, leaving an imprint far beyond the borders of Iran. But no empire remains unchallenged. To the west, across the Aegean, small Greek city-states began resisting Persian expansion. Darius launched campaigns against them, leading to the famous Battle of Marathon in 490 BCE, where a vastly outnumbered Athenian force defeated the Persians. It was a shock, a reminder that even the greatest empire could be wounded. 10 years later, Xerxes, son of Darius, sought revenge. He marched with a colossal army, said to number in the hundreds of thousands, and built a bridge of boats across the Hellespont to invade Greece. At Thermopylae, 300 Spartans and their allies made a legendary stand against overwhelming numbers. At Salamis, Greek ships outmaneuvered the mighty Persian fleet. Despite early victories, Persia suffered humiliating defeats, and its dream of conquering Greece slipped away. Yet these wars, though remembered as Persian losses, also revealed the strength of the empire. Even after setbacks, Persia remained vast, wealthy, and powerful, influencing cultures from Egypt to India. The empire endured for 2 more centuries, adapting, evolving, and leaving behind a legacy of governance, tolerance, and grandeur. When Alexander of Macedon swept eastward in the 4th century BCE, his conquest of Persia was not merely the fall of a kingdom, but the collision of 2 worlds, Greek and Persian. In Persepolis, Alexander set fire to the palaces, a symbolic act of destruction, but even he could not erase what Persia had created. Instead, Greek culture merged with Persian traditions, giving rise to the Hellenistic world, a fusion of East and West that defined an era. And still, Persia endured. Long after Alexander, dynasties rose and fell: the Parthians, who battled Rome; the Sassanids, who revived Persian power and culture, creating one of the greatest empires of late antiquity. Ancient Iran was never just a chapter in history. It was a foundation stone for civilizations, a bridge between East and West, a force that shaped law, religion, art, and empire itself. Its legacy whispers through time. The idea that rulers should respect the faiths of their subjects, the vision of a world connected by roads and communications, the struggle between light and darkness as a moral compass, the art of empire that balances conquest with culture. All these ideas were born in the deserts, mountains, and cities of ancient Iran. To speak of ancient Iran is to speak of grandeur and fragility, of ideals that endure and ambitions that fall. It is to recognize that behind every crumbling column of Persepolis lies a story of vision, unity, and human aspiration. And so, when we look back on the ruins and legends of Persia, we are not only gazing into the past, we are staring into a mirror of humanity's eternal struggle to create, to dominate, to believe, and to leave behind something that will outlast time itself. The story of ancient Iran does not end with the rise of the Achaemenids, nor with their fall. In fact, their empire laid the foundation for centuries of continuity. When we step back and observe, the Iranian plateau seems less like a kingdom of fleeting dynasties and more like a stage where empires rose, fell, and handed the torch to the next guardian of civilization. Each dynasty did not erase the one before, but rather absorbed its lessons, reshaped its memory, and carried the culture forward. This long continuity is what gives Iranian civilization its weight and resilience. Darius the Great, whom we last left building roads and organizing satrapies, was more than an administrator. He was an architect of permanence. His rule ensured that ideas like taxation systems, codified laws, and imperial communication became rooted in Iranian governance. These practices survived long after the Achaemenids were gone, resurfacing in later empires that needed the same tools to command vast lands. It is here that one begins to see the Iranian genius. They thought beyond the moment, beyond the lifetime of one king. They designed systems for centuries. But the human story is not just of kings and satraps. Imagine the daily life of an artisan in Persepolis. He carves stone reliefs of envoys bringing gifts from faraway lands. He may never have seen an Indian elephant or a Scythian horseman, but his hands capture their likeness. He knows, as he chisels, that he is leaving behind a piece of memory that will outlast him. Traders walk past his workshop, carrying lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, spices from India, gold from Lydia. The air is filled with languages he cannot understand, yet he knows they all belong to the empire. In this mingling of cultures, an identity broader than any tribe is born, the identity of being Persian, of being part of something greater than one's birthplace. When Xerxes crossed into Greece, it was not just ambition, it was also the continuation of this vision of vast interconnectedness. Yet history reminds us that even great visions face limits. The battles of Marathon, Salamis and Plataea became wounds to Persian pride, but they did not break the empire. Instead, they revealed something profound, that Persia's destiny lay not in the conquest of Greece, but in the weaving together of Asia, the Middle East, and parts of Africa. Where others sought glory in singular battles, the Persians built an empire whose power lay in its sheer endurance. Still, no empire is eternal. In 330 BCE, when Alexander of Macedon stormed into Persia, the world shook. Alexander's conquest of Persepolis remains one of history's most symbolic moments. Torches blazing, palaces collapsing, centuries of splendor reduced to ashes. For the Greeks, this was triumph. For Persia, it was tragedy. Yet, as flames consumed Persepolis, something paradoxical happened. Alexander, though conqueror, could not resist admiration. He adopted Persian dress, Persian customs, even Persian wives. He recognized that to rule Persia, one had to respect Persia. The conqueror became, in part, conquered. After Alexander's death, the Seleucid dynasty rose over the eastern remnants of his empire. They introduced Hellenistic culture, Greek theaters, coins, and cities, but Iran was not a blank slate. Iranian traditions interwove with Greek ones. Cities like Seleucia on the Tigris became melting pots, where Zoroastrian fire temples might stand not far from Greek gymnasiums. The very fusion of East and West began here, not as abstract philosophy, but as daily reality. People lived in two worlds at once, speaking Greek in markets, praying in Old Persian to Ahura Mazda at night. Then came the Parthians, horselords from the northeastern steppes. If the Seleucids represented Greek influence, the Parthians embodied resilience against foreign domination. Masters of cavalry, they revived Iranian independence with fire and speed. Their arrows, loosed from horseback, humiliated Rome in battles like Carrhae, where legions melted under the assault of mobile warriors. The Parthians proved a truth that Rome itself would learn again and again. The Iranian plateau was not to be tamed. Life under the Parthians was a paradox. On one hand, their loose confederation of noble families made central authority fragile. On the other, their openness allowed a flowering of trade and culture. The Silk Road truly thrived under Parthian guardianship. Imagine caravans winding through deserts and mountains, carrying silk, jade, and spices to the west, and glass, wine, and silver to the east. Iran became the heartbeat of this trade. The Middle Kingdom of connectivity long before China earned the title. Yet the Parthians were only a bridge. The true renaissance of Iranian civilization came with the Sassanids. Rising in the 3rd century CE, they claimed descent from the legendary Achaemenids, and unlike the Parthians, they built strong central authority. Their empire became a mirror and rival to Rome. For 4 centuries, the two titans clashed, Tromans and Sassanians, in a struggle that shaped the destiny of the ancient world. The Sassanians revived Zoroastrianism as state religion, building fire temples where sacred flames burned eternally. Their art glowed with mosaics and silverwork depicting kings hunting lions or receiving divine blessings. Their architecture, with vaulted halls and grand domes, foreshadowed Islamic and Byzantine styles alike. In fact, when you stand under the dome of a mosque or cathedral, you are witnessing echoes of Sassanian genius. But beyond material splendor, the Sassanians also nurtured intellectual life. At Gundashopa, a great academy thrived, hosting Greek, Indian, and Persian scholars. Medicine, astronomy, and philosophy were taught side by side, with translations flowing across cultures. Some historians even call Gundashopa a precursor to the great Islamic Golden Age, for it preserved and passed on knowledge at a time when much of the West was crumbling. The rivalry with Rome and later Byzantium was relentless. Yet despite wars, treaties, and betrayals, the balance of power endured. Neither Rome nor Persia could extinguish the other. This equilibrium shaped the ancient world, ensuring that two centers of civilization existed side by side. where Rome embodied the West, Persia embodied the East, and together they created the dual poles of the ancient Mediterranean and Asian worlds. By the 6th century CE, under Khosrow, known as Anushirvan, the Sasanian Empire reached a zenith. His reign combined military might with reforms that echoed Darius centuries earlier, tax codes, administrative efficiency, and justice that sought fairness across social classes. Tales of his wisdom reached as far as India and China. In later Islamic tradition, his name would be remembered with respect, proof of how deeply his legacy endured. Yet no civilization exists in isolation. From the steppes, new forces stirred the Arabs, united under Islam. When they swept into Persia in the 7th century, the Sasanian Empire, weakened by decades of war with Byzantium, collapsed. But here lies the final marvel of Iranian civilization. Though politically subdued, Iran did not vanish. Instead, it transformed. Zoroastrian fire temples gave way to mosques, but Persian language, art, and philosophy infused the Islamic world. Dynasties like the Abbasids borrowed heavily from Persian administration, court culture, and literature. The Iranian genius endured, simply reshaped under new banners. Thus, part 2 of this journey shows us a truth larger than any one dynasty. The Achaemenids gave Iran its imperial vision, the Seleucids its cultural fusion, the Parthians its resilience, the Sassanians its revival of grandeur. Together they formed a continuum civilization that, though struck by conquest, always rose again, always carried its soul into the next era. This is why Iran is not just another chapter of history, but one of history's grand continuities. When you walk today among the ruins of Persepolis, or gaze upon the Arch of Ctesiphon, the largest brick vault ever built, you are reminded that civilizations do not die, they transform. And Iran, ancient Iran, transformed more than once, carrying its light forward into every age that followed. When the Arab armies swept across Persia in the 7th century, they brought with them the fire of a new faith, Islam. Too many empires, such a moment would have spelled an ending. Yet for Iran, it was a transformation, not an annihilation. Though the Zoroastrian temples dimmed and the fire altars waned, the Persian spirit did not flicker out. Instead, it reshaped itself, flowing into new forms like water poured into a fresh vessel. The Abbasid Caliphate, rising in the 8th century, quickly became the greatest center of learning and culture in the world. Its heart, Baghdad, was in many ways a Persian city. Persian administrators, known for their skill in governance since Achaemenid times, helped craft the institutions that held the vast Islamic empire together. Men like the Barmakid family rose to prominence, guiding caliphs, organizing courts, and ensuring order in lands stretching from Spain to Central Asia. The machinery of empire still carried Persian gears, but administration was only one side of Persia's rebirth. In the courts of the Abbasids, Persian scholars, philosophers, and scientists flourished. The house of wisdom in Baghdad brimmed with knowledge, and Persians were among its brightest stars. Al-Khwarizmi, whose very name gave us the word algorithm, revolutionized mathematics with algebra. Avicenna, or Ibn Sina, compiled the Canon of Medicine, a text that guided physicians in both the Islamic world and medieval Europe for centuries. Omar Khayyam, mathematician, astronomer, and poet, calculated the movements of the heavens while penning verses that still make the heart pause in wonder. In literature, Persia found a voice that echoed through the ages. Ferdowsi, in the 10th century, undertook a monumental task to preserve the memory of pre-Islamic Iran. His Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, wove together myths, legends, and history into an epic poem of more than 50,000 couplets. In its verses, the heroes Rostam and Sohrab battled, kings rose and fell, and the grandeur of Achaemenid and Sassanid Persia lived anew. Ferdowsi's work was not simply poetry. It was resistance, a declaration that Persian identity would not dissolve in the tide of conquest. Persian culture spread outward as well. In the East, the Sassanid dynasty of the 9th and 10th centuries championed the Persian language, ensuring it became a medium for poetry, philosophy, and administration. This language, reshaped by Islamic influence yet deeply rooted in its ancient past, would endure as one of the great languages of civilization. When Turks and Mongols later stormed across the Iranian plateau, they too adopted Persian as the language of refinement and rule. Meanwhile, Persian art continued to bloom. The geometry and harmony of earlier times merged with Islamic calligraphy and design. Mosques rose with domes that gleamed like turquoise jewels against the desert sky. Inside, intricate mosaics wove endless patterns, a visual echo of the Persian love for gardens and order. Miniature painting captured scenes of romance and legend, delicate brushstrokes preserving entire worlds on a page no larger than a hand. The Persian aesthetic, at once bold and refined, set the standard for beauty from India to Anatolia. The Mongol invasions of the 13th century brought devastation. Cities burned, libraries were lost, populations slaughtered. Yet, even the storm of the Mongols could not erase Persia. Instead, in time, the conquerors themselves became Persianized. The Ilkhanate, a Mongol dynasty in Iran, embraced Persian culture, employing Persian scholars and artists to administer and beautify their courts. The Persian gift of assimilation, of absorbing and transforming conquerors, proved once again unbreakable. From this crucible of destruction rose new brilliance. The Timurid dynasty of the 14th and 15th centuries, centered in Samarkand and Herat, presided over a renaissance of Persian art and architecture. Timurid mosques soared with dazzling tilework, their blue domes shining like fragments of the sky. In illuminated manuscripts, Persian miniaturists painted gardens, battles, and love stories with colors so vibrant they still astonish modern eyes. This was the age when Persian art reached its zenith, influencing Ottoman Turkey, Mughal India, and even Europe. And yet, for all its glory, Persia's story was one of continuity as much as change. Across centuries of conquest, from Arabs to Mongols, Persians found ways not only to survive but to shape their conquerors. The core of Persian civilization, its love of poetry, philosophy, gardens, and order, remained intact, like the hidden roots of a tree that continued to nourish even when storms strip its branches. The Safavid dynasty, rising in the 16th century, marked yet another rebirth. Declaring Shia Islam the state religion, the Safavids gave Persia a new identity, distinct from its Sunni neighbors. In Isfahan, they built a city that stunned travelers: vast squares, glittering mosques, and palaces that seemed to float on water. European merchants and envoys marveled at its beauty, calling it half the world. Once again, Persia stood at the crossroads of civilizations, blending East and West, tradition and innovation. Through all these transformations, certain threads remained constant. The Persian love for gardens endured, mirrored in the courtyards of mosques and palaces. The Persian gift for storytelling persisted, in the Shahnameh, in the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, in the mystical verses of Rumi. The Persian commitment to ideas of justice and order, rooted in Zoroastrian Asha and later infused with Islamic ethics, guided rulers and inspired philosophers. By the time European travelers began arriving in greater numbers in the 17th and 18th centuries, they encountered a Persia that was both ancient and alive. They walked streets lined with bazaars, where silks and spices mingled with the scent of saffron and rosewater. They stood in gardens where fountains sang beneath the shade of cypress trees. They read poetry that spoke not only of love and loss, but of the eternal questions of existence. To speak of ancient Iran, therefore, is not to tell a story with a clear beginning and end. It is to trace a river that has flowed for millennia, sometimes rushing, sometimes meandering, but never drying up. From Cyrus to Ferdowsi, from Persepolis to Isfahan, from Zoroastrian fire to Sufi mysticism, the Persian spirit endured, always adapting, always influencing, always alive. Even today, the echoes of that legacy are everywhere. When we sip wine and recall Khayyam's verses, when we walk through gardens designed with flowing water and geometric grace, when we speak of human dignity and moral responsibility, we are in dialogue with Persia. The ruins of Persepolis may stand in silence, but the Persian voice still speaks in poetry, in art, in philosophy, in the very fabric of our shared civilization.